It's 2 in the morning. Your portfolio is down 30% and the futures are still falling. You're sitting alone staring at a screen full of red and a voice in your head is screaming, sell everything, double down, move to cash, hedge. The voice has no plan, just raw fear, and it won't stop talking. Here's what nobody tells you about market crashes. The crash itself doesn't destroy your account. The conversation you have with yourself at 2 in the morning, that decides everything. The traders who survive have a response ready before the crisis arrives. And the traders who blow up are meeting panic for the first time with no framework and no preparation. By the end of this video, you'll have a pre-crash framework that turns the 2 in the morning conversation into one you've already rehearsed. It starts with a lesson from the wrong profession entirely. Now, you might be thinking you can handle it when the time comes, that you'll stay calm under pressure because you've read the books and studied the charts, but here's the problem. A commercial airline pilot trains in a flight simulator hundreds of hours before they face a real emergency. They practice engine failures, electrical fires, and hydraulic loss until the correct response is automatic. The simulator doesn't eliminate fear. It conditions the right response even when fear is present. That distinction matters more than anything else in this video. Preparation is not about removing the emotion. It's about making sure the emotion doesn't get to drive. Every pilot who landed safely in a crisis says the same thing. Their hands moved before their mind caught up, because the rehearsal was that deep. Now ask yourself honestly, have you rehearsed your crash response even once? Or are you planning to improvise at 2 in the morning when cortisol is flooding your system? Let me show you 2 pictures of the 2 in the morning moment. The unprepared trader wakes up to a margin call notification. Their heart is pounding. They open the app and see numbers they never imagined. The internal conversations sound like this. What if it goes to 0? Should I sell now or wait? Maybe it'll bounce. What will my family think? That conversation has no structure. It's pure emotional freefall, and every answer leads to another question that makes the panic worse. No anchor point, no framework, just fear looping on itself. Now picture the prepared trader. Same notification, same red numbers, same pounding heart, but their conversation is completely different. They open a journal to a page written weeks ago. It says, if the position drops below this level, here's what I do and why. The fear is still there, but it doesn't get to make the decision. I'd love to hear your experience with this. Drop a comment below if you've been through a 2 in the morning moment. Here's why the unprepared trader's brain works against them in that moment. Under sustained stress, your nervous system is wired to narrow your focus down to a single priority. Survive the immediate threat. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system, and your prefrontal cortex, the part that does long-term planning and rational analysis, starts shutting down. In its place, your threat response takes over. This response only knows 3 things: fight, flee, or freeze. In trading terms, that means double down aggressively, panic sell everything, or stare at the screen paralyzed and do nothing. Not one of those responses comes from your trading plan. They all come from a part of your brain that cannot read a chart and doesn't know what a stop loss is. The critical insight is that this isn't weakness, it's biology. Your protective instincts are doing exactly what they're designed to do. The problem is that they were designed for physical threats, not financial ones, and they cannot tell the difference between a bear charging at you and your portfolio falling off a cliff. There's a critical mistake that makes this conversation far more dangerous, and most traders don't realize they're making it. They confuse the crash story with the trade story. The crash story is the aggregate macro narrative. Headlines screaming recession, pundits calling for a 50% decline, social media flooded with fear. That story feels enormous, and it's designed to trigger your emotional brain. But the trade story is completely different. The trade story is your specific thesis on your specific position. Why did you enter? What was your target? What would need to change for the thesis to be invalid? Confusing these two is the most expensive mistake a trader can make in a downturn. At 2 in the morning, the crash story wants to take over everything. It wants you to believe that the macro narrative applies equally to every position you hold, but it doesn't. Separating these stories is the first step in your pre-crash framework. Mark Douglas understood this tension better than almost anyone. He said the market can do anything at any time, and most traders hear that and feel helpless. But Douglas meant the opposite. He meant that once you truly accept that any single outcome is possible, you stop needing to predict and start managing. That acceptance is exactly what makes the 2 in the morning conversation manageable. When you've already accepted that a 30% decline is within the range of possible outcomes, it stops being a surprise. It stops triggering the panic spiral because your brain already categorized it as something that could happen. The unprepared trader treats a crash as evidence that something is fundamentally broken. The prepared trader treats it as one scenario from a distribution they've already considered. Douglas went through personal bankruptcy before writing Trading in the Zone, and that experience taught him something no amount of chart study ever could. Prediction is an illusion, but preparation is a choice. and that choice needs to be made long before the crisis arrives. Now here's where it gets practical. Position sizing is the most underrated tool in crash survival, and I want you to think about it differently. Position sizing is how you purchase your choices in advance. Every dollar you allocate determines how much emotional pressure you'll face when things go against you. Say a single position is 20% of your portfolio. It drops 50%. You've lost 10% of total capital from one decision. At 2 in the morning, that math becomes a feeling you're not ready for. But if that same position is 5% of your portfolio and drops 50%, you've lost 2.5%. The fear still exists, but it doesn't overwhelm your ability to think clearly. The 2 in the morning conversation is completely different because the stakes are manageable. You didn't eliminate the risk. You purchased the ability to make a clear-headed decision when it matters most. Let me give you a concrete exercise that will change how you think about risk. Open a spreadsheet or grab a piece of paper. Write down every position you hold and its size as a percentage of total capital. Then calculate what a 50% decline in each one would mean for your total account. Not because 50% is likely for every position, but seeing that number in black and white while you're calm is the most honest risk assessment you'll ever do. What's your biggest position right now? Drop it in the comments, because that exercise alone will shift how you think about concentration risk. Most traders have never done this math. They feel comfortable because positions were built gradually during good times. One ad here, one conviction buy there. But at 2 in the morning, those gradual decisions become one massive number staring back at you. That number determines whether the conversation stays rational or descends into panic. Tudor Jones learned this lesson in the most painful way possible. Early in his career, he wiped out 70% of his account and nearly quit trading entirely. He said something to the effect that he couldn't hack it much longer. That moment, sitting with a 70% drawdown, was his 2 in the morning conversation. But here's what separated Jones from the traders who blow up permanently. He didn't just recover. He built a framework that made him one of the most consistent risk managers in history. Black Monday, 1987. The market lost over 20% in a single day. His fund returned 62% that year. The same trader who nearly quit made a fortune during one of the worst crashes in history. The difference was not talent or prediction. He'd already had the 2 in the morning conversation years earlier and built his system around the answers. Preparation doesn't happen during the crisis. It happens in the calm between them. Now here's the framework itself, and I want you to write this down. For every position you hold, answer 4 questions before the next downturn arrives. Number 1. What is the thesis for this position? Write it in plain language, not technical jargon. Why are you in this trade? Number 2, what specific development would break this thesis? Not a price level, but a fundamental change that would mean your reason for being in the trade no longer exists. Number 3, what is your maximum acceptable loss on this position as a percentage of total capital? Write the actual number and be honest about whether you could sleep through that loss. And number 4, what will you tell yourself at 2 in the morning? Write the exact words you need to read when fear is at its peak. Something like, my thesis is intact, my position size is manageable, and this drawdown is within my pre-accepted range. Those 4 answers become your flight simulator. When the crisis arrives, you don't need to think, you just need to read. There's a deeper layer to this framework that ties directly to the O'Neill methodology this channel follows. If you're doing this right, the 2 in the morning conversation should rarely happen in the first place. Distribution days are your early warning system. Institutional selling stacks up over several weeks. Leading stocks break below their 50-day moving averages. The market shows 4 or 5 distribution days in a concentrated window. Your pre-decided rule says move the cash. Not because you're predicting a crash, not because you're afraid, because your framework says this is what you do when these signals appear. That's the ultimate version of pre-deciding your response. You don't wait for the 2 in the morning moment. You follow the signals that tell you to protect capital before the fear arrives. And when the market flashes a follow-through day, a massive rally on heavy volume confirming buyers are back, your framework says re-engage. The entire process is rule-based, and the emotional conversation never takes over. Now here's the insight that brings everything together, and most traders completely miss it. The calm between crises is where the actual work lives. Not the studying, not the chart analysis, not the strategy optimization, but the psychological preparation. Most traders treat the space between drawdowns as a break from the hard part. They relax, they get comfortable, they stop thinking about risk because the account is green and nothing hurts. But the traders who survive crashes treat the calm period as their simulator time. They write their framework. They audit their position sizes. They answer the 4 questions for every position while their prefrontal cortex is fully online and functioning. The crisis itself is just the test, and the calm is where you study for it. If this is hitting home, subscribe, because we go deep on trading psychology every week. The next crash is not a question of if, only when, and the only variable you control is how prepared you are when it arrives. We started this video with you sitting alone at 2 in the morning, staring at red, with a voice screaming to do something. Now imagine that same moment. This time you reach for your journal and turn to the page you wrote last month. Position 1. Thesis intact. Thesis breaking development has not occurred. Loss within pre-accepted range. You close the journal and go back to sleep, not because the fear is gone. The fear is still there, loud and real and pressing on your chest. But the fear doesn't get to make the decision because you already made it. That's the difference between the trader who survives and the one who doesn't. The crash NEVR decided your outcome. The conversation you had with yourself in the calm weeks before the panic, that decided everything. Your 2 in the morning conversation has already started. You're having it right now while you're calm enough to prepare. Don't waste it. Share this with a trader who needs to hear it.